We landed on Mars in a dust storm. The landscape stretched endlessly, but the colony stood ahead of us. I felt my heart race as I stepped outside the capsule. The rusty domes felt wrong. I can't explain it, but the silence wrapped around me like a heavy fog. Dust piled in the corners of the crumbling habitats. Now I think about those craters, about shadows flitting just out of sight. They were just shadows, right? It's been 6 months since the colony's disappearance, and I found myself leading a small research team. We started our investigation right away. We recorded readings and cataloged debris. It felt normal, even with those dust storms cutting visibility. At some point I stumbled upon the main hub. A faint flickering light caught my eye. It felt oddly comforting, yet deeply unsettling. I thought it might be a power source, but I quickly realized it was a distress signal, still transmitting. How was that possible after all these years? I didn't want to keep my team in the dark. I gathered them, explained the situation, and we decided to trace the source together. As we walked deeper into the hub, I felt a chill creep up my spine. This was different from the Mars cold. Something felt alive, as if it was watching me. I shouldn't have ignored that feeling. My team scattered, exploring personal belongings, worn boots, old photos, notes that hinted at fear and desperation. My heart pounded again. I tried to focus, but whispers drifted in the air. They were soft at first, barely audible, then sharper. I stopped and asked if anyone else could hear them. They didn't look at me right. I glanced around. I was alone. I thought I was losing my mind. Was it stress? One night, everything changed. I woke up screaming, convinced I heard cries for help coming from the walls. My hands shook. I wanted answers. It was so real I could almost touch it. I felt cold. Cold like I had never felt before. Maybe it was just isolation. Then I stumbled upon a note. It said, "They're watching you. Get out." I turned around. Cold dread gripped me. I wasn't alone anymore. What I saw still haunts me. It flickered, something dark and shapeless. Shadows danced, and I couldn't bring myself to breathe. My instincts screamed at me to run. I backed away slowly, remembering the colonists. I was terrified of becoming another lost mystery. My heart raced as panic swallowed me. I needed to escape. But what happened to them? I don't think I'll ever know. Days passed. I could feel it closing in. The whispers grew louder. They felt too tangible, too real. I couldn't shake the dread that something was behind me, watching me. Then, I heard a voice again. This time it asked, "Why are you here?" I froze. I thought it was my team, but when I turned, nobody was there. I stumbled back, fear clawing at my chest. I never felt more alone. I still don't know what happened to those colonists, but I swear, Mars is hiding a secret, and I'm terrified it wants to keep me too. The next day, I was determined to dig deeper. I couldn't just sit and wait for something to happen. My gut told me there was more to discover, more answers buried beneath the dust. So I gathered my team again. We needed to examine the power hub closely and see if we could find a way to access the source of that distress signal. As we entered the hub, the atmosphere felt heavy. I could sense the tension simmering within the group. Jason, one of the engineers, suggested we check the control panel. It might give us some insight into what had happened here. I nodded, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that someone or something was looming in the darkness. The control panel flickered with faulty screens, and Jason's fingers danced over the switches. I glanced around, half expecting to see shadows darting. The whispers had grown fainter, but they weren't gone. They felt like static in my mind. I shook my head to clear it. I couldn't let fear take control. Suddenly the console lit up. Lines of code streamed across the screen, revealing logs from the last few days of the colony's operation. My heart sank as I read. The last entries spoke of a contamination, something they were desperate to contain. "We can't trust anyone," one note read. "It knows we're here." My stomach twisted. The colonists had feared something. Jason found a log detailing a power outage, something that matched the priority of the distress signal. "This was right before they disappeared," he said. "They tried to fix it, but they must have failed." I could feel the dread coiling in my stomach again. Then I saw it. a shadow out of the corner of my eye. I turned quickly, but nothing was there, just walls, dusty and cracked, closing in on us. "Did you see that?" I asked Jason, my voice shaky. He paused, looking at me with concern. "See what?" "Nothing," I replied, shaking my head. I didn't want to admit it. We pressed on, moving deeper into the hub, following that haunting echo of the distress signal. Every corridor felt familiar yet foreign, as if I had stepped into another world. The whispers picked up again, swirling around us like a storm. Then, a loud bang echoed through the hallway. We froze. Even the whispers hushed for a moment. Every instinct urged me to run, but I kept moving forward. I had to know. Jason glanced nervously at me, and I could see fear etched on his face. As we rounded a corner, we came upon a rusted door labeled containment. It was slightly ajar, and the air released was chilling. The distress signal pulsed stronger, almost a heartbeat of its own. I exchanged glances with my team. "What's in there?" Jason asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't answer. I stepped closer, drawn in by an unseen force. Curiosity pushed me, but the warning note flashed in my mind. "They're watching you." Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door wider. The moment I did, the signal cut off. Darkness swallowed the space before us. That's when I saw it. Something moved within the shadows, shifting, almost alive. It felt as if it had recognized my presence, and a wave of fear washed over me. I realized I needed to leave, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. What lurked in the dark now knew I was here. I stood frozen as the shape in the shadows twisted slowly, revealing a form that was unsettling. It was like a creature pulled from a nightmare, amorphous, shifting, indistinct. My heart raced, pounding against my ribs as the air thickened with an unknown dread. "Guys," I managed to whisper, barely audible. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I felt rooted to the spot. Jason, still behind me, must have sensed something was wrong. I could hear him breathing heavily. I could feel his fear. "Back away slowly," he said, his voice shaky as he urged me. "We need to get out of here." I took a step back, my eyes locked on the dark figure. The whispers in my mind intensified, a cacophony of warnings and cries for help. It was no longer just a signal. It was a living echo of desperation. Suddenly, the dark form lunged forward, a jarring movement that broke the terrifying stillness. I gasped and stumbled back further, nearly colliding with Jason. "What the hell is that?" he shouted, panic clear in his voice. I could only shake my head. My mind raced with the possibility of what was behind that creature. It had to be connected to the colony's disappearance, to the contamination they had all feared. But what was it? Then, without warning, the lights flickered back on, illuminating the containment room. For a brief moment I could see what lay inside. A chamber filled with broken equipment, but more importantly, the walls were covered with hastily scrawled warnings. "It's alive," and "Contain it." I glanced around, desperate for answers. My gaze landed on something slumped against the far wall. A figure. One of the colonists? A chill ran down my spine. "No, no." Jason grabbed my arm tightly. "We've seen enough. We need to leave now." The shadows danced behind the figure, and it moved again, more distinct this time. I saw a face, a twisted, pale visage, its mouth opening as if trying to form a word. My blood ran cold. It was saying something. Help us. That was all it took. The instinct to survive surged through me. I turned on my heel and bolted back the way we came, Jason following close behind. The sound of our footsteps echoed in the hall, mixing hauntingly with the whispers that seemed to mock our retreat. We skidded around corners, desperately trying to find our way back to the main exit. I could feel the creature's presence behind us, lurking in the shadows. The whispering intensified, rattling my thoughts, urging me to look back. But I couldn't. The warning etched in my mind pushed me onward. I forced myself to concentrate as we reached the main corridor leading back toward the entrance. Suddenly, the control panel buzzed back to life, hues of red flashing across the screens. An alert blared, and I felt a surge of apprehension. "The system is on lockdown," Jason shouted as he checked the doors. "We're trapped." "Keep moving," I yelled, panic setting in. If that dark thing caught up to us, I didn't want to find out what happened next. As we raced down the corridor, I couldn't shake the feeling of being pursued. The air pulsed with fear, and the whispers rose like a tide. With no time to think, we bolted toward an emergency exit just visible down the hall. But that's when I heard it. The soft thud of footsteps, not our own. Someone else was in the power hub. "Jason," I gasped. "We're not alone." Everything felt like it was closing in, and I knew we were running out of time. I barely had time to process Jason's sharp intake of breath before a figure emerged from the shadows. My heart raced again, this time for an entirely different reason. It was a man, disheveled and wild-eyed, his clothing tattered. I could barely see his face, but the panic radiating off him was evident. "Get out," he yelled, stumbling toward us. "You don't understand what's happening." "What do you mean?" I shouted, my voice rising over the alarms that continued to blare. "Who are you?" He paused, glancing behind him as if something pursued him even now. His breath came in heaves, and he stared at us with a mixture of desperation and fear. "I'm Dr. Samuels. I've been stuck here for weeks. The creature, it's taken them. It changes people." My mind swirled. The creature could alter reality, maybe even the people around us. Taken them? Where? "I don't know," he cried. "But if we don't leave, it will take you too." And just like that, the tension in my gut twisted tighter. I was faced with two pressing fears: the creature lurking in the dark, and this man claiming to hold vital information. "Can you help us get out? The doors are locked." Jason's voice trembled as he leaned closer, urgency spilling from his words. Dr. Samuels nodded, his movements jerky as he pulled a small device from his pocket. "I can access the system, but we need to hurry." He rushed to the control panel, fingers flying over the keys. I felt my breath catching as I darted glances back into the shadows. The whispering had returned, sharper, like a knife edging closer. "What's happening?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. He didn't look up. "It's trying to break through. We have to move." The lights flickered ominously as his hands fumbled for something. Just as the screen flashed a message, the whispers crescendoed to a deafening roar. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw a dark shape moving, the edges soft yet merciless, as if it were reaching for us. "No!" I shouted, adrenaline seeping into my veins. "Hurry!" Dr. Samuels cursed under his breath, concentration etched into his features. "Almost there," he muttered, but suddenly, a low growl filled the air, chilling me to the core. The creature was coming. The screen blinked erratically. "There! The doors are wired to a failsafe. I can bypass it, but it will take a moment." "Do it faster!" Jason yelled, looking back at the darkened corridor that felt like it was closing in on us. Then, everything went dark. The emergency lights flickered and extinguished, plunging us into an unsettling silence. "Dr. Samuels?" My voice quivered in the shadowy void. "What happened?" I felt a surge of panic racing through me. Something wasn't right. And when the lights returned, a new horror unfolded before me. Dr. Samuels was gone, as if he vanished into thin air. "What the hell?" I turned to Jason, my mind racing. He just disappeared." "I don't know," Jason said, panic bleeding through his words. "But we need to move." Before I could process his urgency, I heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper, sounding just like Dr. Samuels. "Help me." I shook my head, refusing to believe it. This place was playing tricks on me. "Let's go." Jason grabbed my wrist and we took off again, hearts pounding, desperate for escape. But as we moved further into the darkness, I felt a gnawing dread settle in my gut. Someone, or something, was watching us. And I couldn't help but wonder, what price would we have to pay to find the truth? We sprinted down the corridor, my heart hammering against my ribs. The air felt thick, almost alive, and each turn held the promise of a new danger. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed, that every shadow hid something sinister. "Where do we go?" I gasped, glancing back at Jason. He was just as frantic as I was, his eyes wide with fear. "Just keep moving." His voice strained as he pushed forward. The dim light from the emergency lantern flickered irregularly, casting long shadows that danced along the walls. I tried to focus, but thoughts of Dr. Samuel's warning buzzed in my ears. The creature. What had happened to him? Had he really vanished, or was he taken? I stumbled over a crack in the floor, barely able to keep my footing. "We need to find another way out," I shouted, feeling a surge of determination. Jason nodded, and we veered right. We passed an old laboratory. The glass windows shattered, revealing a scene of chaos inside. Scattered papers, broken equipment. A memory flickered to my mind. Dr. Samuel speaking of things that changed people. I wondered what experiments had taken place here. "Wait," Jason's voice broke through the haze of my thoughts. He pointed toward a door marked, "Emergency Exit." I dashed toward it, hope rising in my chest. If we could get through, maybe we'd find our way back to safety. But as I reached for the handle, an icy dread washed over me. "Don't open it," Jason yelled, grabbing my arm. "What if it's a trap?" "What choice do we have?" I shot back, panic clawing at me. "We can't just keep running in circles." Suddenly the ground shook beneath our feet and a deep guttural growl echoed through the air, vibrating through my bones. I froze, gripping the handle tightly. "Run!" Jason screamed, eyes wide with terror. I didn't need to be told twice. We pivoted and sprinted back the way we came, breathing hard, desperation fueling our every step. But with each passing moment, I felt as though the walls were closing in. The whispers morphed into an anguished wail that filled the corridor, matching my growing anxiety. "Help me!" The voice was unmistakably Dr. Samuel's. "Stop," Jason said, skidding to a halt. "Did you hear that?" My heart sank. "It's him. He's still here. We can't leave him." "Are you crazy? We have to go." Jason's face was pale. I could see the conflict in his eyes. But there was something urgent in the tone of that whisper, something that made me want to turn back. "We can't just abandon him." "Do you honestly think we can help him?" Jason shot back, desperation oozing from his voice. "What if the creature is waiting for us? We have to survive first." Before I could respond, shadows moved along the walls, a black mass pooling at the far end of the corridor. "It wants us," I breathed, seeing the shape shift and stretch in ways that defied logic. In that moment, I realized what it was. This was no mere nightmare. The thing I feared was real, and it was closing in. "Back, now!" Jason shouted, tugging at my arm. But it was too late for hesitation. I took a step back, glancing at the growing darkness that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly hunger. "We have to find him," I pleaded one last time, but my voice trembled. Could we really turn back? That's when I saw it. A door to the side, partially ajar, just big enough for us to slip through. "Jason, there," I pointed. But as I looked back at the shadows, I realized the whispers weren't just echoes anymore. They were calling to me, and I couldn't help but wonder, could I trust my instincts or would they lead me straight into the creature's grasp? We burst through the partially opened door, my hand shaking as I pushed it wide enough for both of us to squeeze through. The room inside was dark, the small beam of the emergency lantern barely illuminating the corners. It smelled damp, like something rotten had been left to decay. "Where are we?" Jason whispered, his voice barely above a breath. I stepped further inside, scanning the unfamiliar space. There were no windows, the walls made of dull metal. This was no escape. It felt like a cell. "I don't know," I replied softly, trying to suppress the panic creeping up my spine. As we waited, the low growl outside grew louder, vibrating against the walls. I thought I saw something moving in the shadows, but it was just a trick of the light. We had to stay quiet. Yet the silence felt heavy, almost suffocating. "Do you think it followed us?" Jason asked, glancing toward the door we had just come through. "I don't know. I think it's waiting." My heart raced. The thought made me shudder. What if we were trapped? Just then, I noticed something on the far wall. A series of tall lockers, one of which was ajar. A chill ran through me, and I hesitated to approach, but curiosity pushed me forward. Maybe there was something inside that could help us. Tools or a weapon. With a shaky hand, I pulled the door open wider and the rusty hinges creaked ominously. I peered inside. Empty. But then I saw it. A folder resting at the back, thick and dust-covered. Another dead end, I muttered, but something compelled me to reach in. I pulled the folder out and opened it. Inside were documents, yellowed with age, detailing the colony's experiments and findings. I flicked through the papers, my eyes widening in disbelief. "Look at this," I said, turning to Jason, who had been watching nervously. "These reports talk about behavioral changes in the colonists. Dr. Samuels was involved in this?" "What do you mean?" He moved closer, peering over my shoulder. "They were experimenting on the colonists, something about altering their genetics. This could be what happened to Dr. Samuels." A mix of horror and fascination washed over me. This wasn't just a facility gone wrong. It was a nightmare waiting to be uncovered. As I flipped through the reports, one particularly caught my eye. It referenced something called Subject A, and the notes were not just medical, but they hinted at something dark and sinister. Suddenly, the growling outside intensified, vibrating through the walls, pulling me back to the present. "We need to go," Jason urged, looking around anxiously. Before I could respond, the earth shook again, more violently this time. The lights flickered and then went out, plunging us into complete darkness. My pulse raced as my grip tightened on the folder, fear clawing at my throat, and then a low, whispering voice, like flowing water, filled the air. "Help me!" It was Dr. Samuels, echoing from the darkness. But was it really him? Or was it a trap? I felt Jason pull me back, fear mingling with realization. We couldn't linger. If Dr. Samuels was in pain, was calling for help, he could also be the source of whatever terror hunted us. I had to choose. Stay and risk our lives, or trust our instincts for a way out. But before I could make a decision, I heard a sound that froze my blood. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, approaching from outside our hiding place. The footsteps grew louder, echoing in sync with my rapid heartbeat. They were unmistakably coming closer, and I could feel every nerve in my body screaming for us to run. "Jason," I whispered, my voice trembling. "We have to move. Now." We eased away from the lockers, the folder still clutched tightly against my chest. The darkness felt alive, pressing in on us from all sides. Jason nodded, his eyes darting nervously, scanning the space for any possible escape routes. "Where do we go?" he whispered back, fear evident in his voice. "Maybe there's another way out," I suggested, inching toward the far wall, hoping to find something, anything that might lead us away from here. I could hear Jason follow closely behind, his breath shaky and rapid in the oppressive silence. Suddenly the growls outside morphed into deep, guttural sounds, and I froze, heart hammering in my chest. This wasn't just an animal. Whatever it was, it could hunt us. "We should check the lockers," Jason urged, voice barely above a whisper. "I already looked," I said. "They're empty." But the nagging feeling in my gut told me I was wrong. I turned back to the lockers, scanning each one again. As I reached for the one I had already opened, something caught my eye in the corner. It was a small metallic object, half hidden in the gloom. I grabbed it, pulling it into the flickering light of the lantern. It was a key, a rusted key, but still intact. "Look," I held it up, hoping it would unlock something more than just a door. "Where do you think it leads?" Jason asked, excitement creeping into his voice. "Maybe one of these lockers," I said, trying to remember if any of them had a lock. Or, before I could finish, the footsteps stopped just beyond the door. A sense of dread washed over me. Whatever was out there had paused, listening, waiting. My instincts kicked in. We had no time. "We have to find a way out now." With a shaky hand, I pushed the key into the nearest locker. It slid in easily, turning with a soft click, and I pulled the door open. Inside was another folder, this one adorned with a biohazard symbol. My heart raced even faster, but curiosity urged me forward. "Should we look?" Jason asked, anxiety lacing his tone. "Just a peek," I agreed. I flipped the folder open and gasped. The first page was a photo printed in black and white, a picture of Dr. Samuels, but he looked different, disheveled and filled with fear, a prisoner in a cage. Below it was a note. Subject A showed resistance to the chemical enhancements. Handle with care. "What does this mean?" Jason said, peering over my shoulder. "I don't know, but it looks like he wasn't alone. There were others," I said, flipping through the pages quickly. Each report was worse than the last, detailing inhumane experiments on the colonists. Suddenly, an ear-splitting crash sounded, the door splintering as something slammed into it. My heart dropped. "We need to go, now!" I shouted, shoving the folder into Jason's hands before darting back toward the far wall. Then I spotted it, a small vent near the baseboard. "Over here!" I gestured urgently, and without hesitation we squeezed through the space. The faint sound of breathing, not our own, hissing just behind us. I felt the cool metal of the vent against my hand as we crawled through. I had no idea where it led, but I knew we had little time. Then everything went dark again. But this time, it wasn't just the lights. The darkness seemed to whisper my name, wrapping around me. I glanced back at Jason, his face pale and frightened. The hissing grew louder, and that meant one thing. It was coming for us. I pushed myself forward, urgency bleeding into every inch of my being. This can't be the end, I thought, knowing that I had to get us both out before it was too late. I pushed through the vent, my hands shaking as I fought against the panic closing in on me. The darkness was almost suffocating, but I had to keep moving. The hissing behind us was relentless, a twisted reminder that we weren't alone in this claustrophobic nightmare. I could hear Jason whispering my name, barely audible over the metallic clinks of our movements echoing in the narrow space. "Do you think it's gone?" His voice trembled, and I could feel the tension vibrating between us. "I don't think so," I hissed back. "Just keep moving. Focus." The vent twisted and turned, and every few feet I had to shift position to keep crawling. The air was stale and tinged with something I couldn't quite place. Chemical, maybe? My mind raced back to the folder, the experiments, the idea that we might be in a facility designed for something far more sinister than just research. I felt a jolt of fear. This wasn't just a derelict building, it was a tomb. Just as we rounded a sharp turn in the vent, I spotted a faint glow at the end. "Look!" I pointed ahead, relief flooding my voice. "Light! It has to be an exit." We picked up the pace, clawing our way faster through the small opening. The hissing behind us intensified and I could feel my heart rate spike again. We edged closer to the light, and finally I reached it. Pushing with every ounce of strength, I forced the vent cover open, tumbling out into the space beyond. I gasped as I landed ungracefully on the cold floor. Jason followed, glancing back, still clearly terrified. What I took in next nearly made me lose my breath. We were in a large, dimly lit room filled with rows of tables, each cluttered with what looked like vials and equipment that resembled something out of a horror film. "This looks like a lab," Jason whispered, his eyes widening at the scene. "What were they doing here?" "More than we thought, clearly," I said, my gaze sweeping the place frantically. Just then, I noticed a large screen flickering on one wall, displaying a series of grainy videos. People in white lab coats stood around holding strange equipment, and in the center, I could see a figure restrained on a table, breathing heavily. The subject was a man, but not just any man. It looked like Dr. Samuels. His eyes darted around, swimming with desperation. "Damn it, what did they do to him?" Jason breathed, horror etched across his face. Before I could respond, the video cut to a close-up of a clipboard. The camera zoomed in on a document, a list of names. Each name was accompanied by a date and a symbol I recognized, a biohazard symbol. Then I noticed my heart dropped. One name stood out. Subject A, Jason Miller. "Jason," I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. "There's something here about you." He stepped closer, his face drained of color. "What? What does it say?" Before I could explain, a loud crash echoed from the hallway behind us. The vent, The only possible entry point we had just crawled through had been violently ripped away. We weren't alone anymore. "Run!" I yelled, adrenaline kicking in as I turned to the nearest door. We bolted toward it, leaving the horrifying scene behind. Whatever was hunting us was close, and I could feel its breath on my neck. "Keep going!" Jason shouted, as the sound of heavy footsteps grew closer. The room was getting smaller, and I knew we had to find a way out. Desperation clawed at my chest. I hit the door handle, praying it would open. It was now or never. The door swung open, and we burst through into a narrow hallway. My lungs burned from crawling in the vent, but there was no time to rest. The footsteps behind us were closer now, heavy and relentless, echoing down the corridor. "Where do we go?" Jason panted, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "We need to find stairs and exit," I said, my mind racing. The hallway was lined with faded posters, their messages barely legible. "Keep calm," one read. "Trust in the process," another proclaimed. A chill crept down my spine. They weren't keeping us safe. They were keeping something else contained. Just then, we reached a junction. To the left, the hallway stretched into darkness. To the right, a flickering light blinked invitingly. I hesitated, searching for any clue that might point us to safety. "Which way?" Jason asked, his voice edged with panic. "Right," I decided, racing down the illuminated path. As we ran, I could feel our footsteps pounding in sync, a desperate rhythm against the sterile floor. We turned a corner and skidded to a stop. There, at the end of the hall, was a clear glass door labeled Security, with heavy locks embedded in the frame. I tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "It's locked!" Before I could consider our next move, a loud crash echoed behind us. The hissing was back, closer, angrier. "We have to break it open," Jason said, eyes wide with fear. "No time!" I yelled, spinning around and pushing past him. We couldn't stay here. The door to the left caught my eye. It was slightly ajar, the light spilling into the hall. "Over here!" We slipped into the room, closing the door softly behind us. The space was cramped, filled with filing cabinets and papers strewn everywhere. A desk in the corner held a dusty computer monitor, its screen blinking lifelessly. "Can you find something useful?" I asked Jason, heart racing. He rushed to the desk, frantically pushing papers aside. I scanned the room for any other exits, but it was one way in and one way out. "What about these files?" Jason called out, holding up a few battered pages. "It looks like personnel records." "Find anything on me? Or Dr. Samuels?" My stomach tightened. He shuffled through the piles, muttering names under his breath. "Here, look at this." He handed me a page, and my eyes zeroed in on the bold title, Project Redacted. It detailed a series of experiments aimed at enhancing human capabilities, but it wasn't just the experiments that made me shudder. At the bottom was a daunting line. Subject A, Jason Miller. Elimination status. Pending. I dropped the paper, my heart sinking. "They plan to eliminate you." Jason's face drained of color again. "What does that mean? Am I next?" The door rattled, and the hissing grew louder, merging with the sound of heavy footsteps. No more time. I grabbed Jason's arm and pulled him toward the small window in the room. "We need to get out now." I felt a surge of hope as I pushed the window up, but it was stuck. I glanced back at Jason. His face was a mask of horror. "We can't let it catch us." With a final desperate push, the window budged open. The sound of the door splintering filled the air. "Out! Now!" I shouted, waiting impatiently as he climbed through first. Just as I followed him, a shadow burst into the room behind us. We were running out of chances, and this time, I could feel my instincts screaming at me. A flash of movement caught my eye, something darting toward us in the fading light. We had to find the truth, and fast. We scrambled out of the window, landing hard on the ground outside. The air was sharp and cold, a stark contrast to the atmosphere of dread we had just fled. But freedom felt hollow. Something was still watching us, waiting just beyond the shadows. "Where are we?" Jason gasped, gathering himself as he rolled over to glance back at the building. The facility loomed ominously against the red Martian sky, its bleak walls stained with age and something darker, perhaps fear itself. We just need to get away from there. I took a deep breath, still reeling from everything we'd uncovered. The experiments, the whispers of Dr. Samuels, and the realization that Jason might be next haunted me. A distant rumble echoed across the landscape, and I turned instinctively, feeling the ground tremble beneath my feet. "What was that?" I asked, dread flooding back. "I don't know," Jason replied, scanning the horizon. "But we have to find shelter. We can't stay out here." I looked around, desperately searching for anything that resembled refuge. The remnants of other habitats sprawled out in the distance, ghostly structures punctuated by the dusty terrain. We started toward the nearest one, each step feeling like a gamble against the lurking unknown. As we approached, I could see through the glass. Inside was a jumble of broken equipment and abandoned belongings. It echoed with the silence of days long past, but the sense of being watched clung to me. "Let's check it out," I said, urging Jason forward. He hesitated. "Are you sure? It looks, unsettling." "It's better than being out in the open," I countered. "We need answers, Jason." As we stepped inside, the door creaked ominously, groaning as if reluctant to let us in. Dust motes floated suspended in the stale air, and I felt a chill creep down my spine. The atmosphere was thick with unresolved tension, as if the very walls held their breath waiting for some impending disaster. We sifted through the debris, my heart racing with each crumpled report I picked up. Subject A, I read aloud from one of the files, demonstrated heightened awareness and intelligence. There were sketches, diagrams, evidence of something grotesque that had happened to the colonists. "They experimented on people," Jason murmured, his voice distant as he rifled through a box. "They wanted to create something superior." I swept my gaze across the room, trying to glean more from the memories trapped in the dust. "But at what cost?" I whispered, abruptly realizing that answers might not be all we sought. Then, a sound pierced the silence. A soft whispering, creeping along the edges of my consciousness, indistinguishable from the whispers we had heard before. "Help. Me." "Do you hear that?" I asked, dropping the papers, dread pooling in my stomach. Jason's eyes widened. "Is it Dr. Samuels?" Before I could respond, there was a loud crash. The sound jangled my nerves, and I instinctively ducked down, dragging Jason with me as panic surged through the air like static. "What was that?" he hissed, his eyes darting to every dark corner. "Something's here," I replied, my heart racing. "We have to move." We scrambled back toward the entrance just as a shadow broke across the threshold, a shape swirling in the dim light, dark and undulating like a living nightmare. My breath caught in my throat. "Run!" I shouted, yanking Jason toward the exit as the dark figure drew closer, its whispers morphing into a deafening roar. We dashed out just as the apparition lunged for us, feeling the rush of wind as it moved. We didn't stop, sprinting over the cracked ground toward another distant structure maybe could find refuge within. "Go," I urged, urging Jason to keep pace, fear urging at my heels. Behind us the shadows writhed and curled. The whispers grew into screams, shouts of despair that echoed through the canyons of the Martian surface. "Help us. You mustn't leave us." The voices blended with the darkness, a chorus of lost souls, and just before we reached the next colony, I turned to look back. The shroud of darkness billowed like smoke, twisting and contorting as if it were alive. It felt like it was calling to me, yearning to pull me back into the void from which it came. "Don't look back," Jason shouted, his voice sharp. "We need to focus." We stumbled into the next structure, the door slamming shut behind us, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was dark and dusty, but it felt safer. There was no light thrumming outside, just endless silence filling the air. "What now?" Jason panted. "What are we looking for?" I choked on my thoughts. Answers. A way off this planet. But as I turned the lantern on, I caught sight of something out of the corner of my eye. The walls were covered in signs and symbols, scrawled warnings that had once been imprinted with fear. Yet one message stuck out above the rest, chilling my blood. It knows you. It will find you. We had entered a trap, a dark realm woven with fear and anguish, and there was no escaping the lingering shadow that seemed to watch every move we made. As the darkness pressed close, I felt a chilling weight in my gut. What had they unleashed on Mars? And were we to be its next victims? With those questions hanging heavy in the air, I realized that while danger had momentarily receded, the deeper mystery remained. We had survived so far, but one truth was undeniable. No one truly leaves Mars unscathed. Whatever it is, it's not done with us yet, I murmured, my voice filled with a hope that began to feel like despair. Outside, the whispers circled endlessly, and I knew deep down my unease was just beginning.